My name is Emily. I was 28 years old when my entire world collapsed in a single week. One moment I was an art teacher in Seattle, living a simple life, planning a spring wedding. The next moment I was standing in a lawyer's office, staring at the reality that my parents had left me nothing but a broken-down cabin in Alaska, while my older brother inherited a mansion in Miami, worth $2.5 million, along with the family empire. It felt like the universe had chosen sides. My brother was celebrated, rewarded, and trusted with everything. And me? I was treated like a leftover, an afterthought, someone who could be sent away into the wilderness with nothing but dust and decay. That was not even the worst of it. The man I thought I would marry, James, looked me in the eye and called me a pathetic loser. Within days, he walked out of my apartment and into my brother's mansion. He left me not only grieving the death of my parents but abandoned, betrayed, and humiliated. I thought my life was finished, but I had no idea what waited inside that forgotten cabin. I had no idea that the rotten floorboards hid a secret worth more than $100 million. And I had no idea that the key to my true inheritance was not money or property. It was something far deeper. You see, people believe betrayal kills you, but betrayal is only the doorway. What comes after, what you choose to do when the world strips you bare, that is where you discover who you really are. I still remember the icy silence after James slammed the door. I sat there, staring at the engagement ring he had abandoned on the table. My brother and my fiancé, two people who should have been my family, had united against me. In that silence, I heard the echo of my father's words from years ago. He once said, "The world will test you when you least expect it. What you do in that moment defines the rest of your life." That moment had come for me. I was left with nothing but grief, humiliation, and a cabin that smelled of mildew and broken promises. Yet, in that emptiness, something stirred inside me. I wanted to run away, to bury my pain, but a whisper inside told me to go to Alaska, to face the gift that felt like an insult. And that was where my journey began. It was not just about inheritance. It was about discovering what my parents truly saw in me. It was about uncovering a secret legacy that had been buried beneath wood and stone. And it was about learning that sometimes life rips away the people and things you thought you wanted, so it can place in your hands what you actually need. I did not know it then, but every betrayal, every insult, every loss was setting the stage for something extraordinary. So, stay with me. Because the story I am about to tell you will prove that sometimes the greatest treasures hide inside the deepest wounds, and that what looks like rejection can actually be the purest form of trust. That night, I lay awake, replaying every word James had thrown at me. "You are nothing without your family's money. You are wasting your life teaching art to children who will never care." His voice cut deeper than any blade. But what if he was wrong? What if there was something inside me that even he could not see? The cabin waited, broken and abandoned, like me. But deep inside, beneath the rotten roof and warped walls, a secret waited. And that secret would change not only how I saw my parents, but how I saw myself. This is where my story truly begins. When I look back, I realize the shock of that will reading was only the first blow. The deeper wound was not about the money. It was about what my parents' decisions seemed to say about me, that my life, my choices, my very worth, were less valuable than my brother's ambitions. I sat in that lawyer's office with my hands trembling, listening as my brother nodded confidently, claiming control of the empire. A mansion in Miami. An investment portfolio worth over $4 million. The company with all its projects and assets. He received the visible empire, the kind that makes headlines. And then there was me. The forgotten child. The one who was given a rundown cabin in Bristol Bay, Alaska. A place so far removed from the world I had built in Seattle that it felt like an exile. The letter my parents left me was short, almost tender. They wrote that they admired my independence, that they thought I would find peace in the cabin's simplicity. They claimed it was not about love, but about different paths. Yet, as I folded the letter, all I could feel was rejection. The subtext was clear. Zachary's ambitions were worth millions, and mine were worth an old shack. James sat next to me, stone-faced, squeezing my hand in a gesture that felt more like restraint than comfort. Later, in the car, when I finally broke the silence and whispered, "It's not fair," he only shrugged and muttered, "Life isn't fair." His lack of outrage stung more than the will itself. That was the moment I knew something had cracked open between us. The man who once told me I was his world now seemed relieved to have an excuse to walk away. And within days, he did exactly that. But before I take you further, let me pause for a moment and ask you something important. If you have ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or told your dreams were not valuable, then you already know a piece of my pain. Before I go on, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories, because none of us should carry these wounds alone. And if you want to follow this journey all the way to the end, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to take you into places you won't believe. I had to decide what to do with the scraps I had been given. Part of me wanted to sell the cabin site unseen, take whatever little cash I could get, and wash my hands of my family's insult. But another part of me, the part that had once spent summers fishing on that lake, sitting by the fire as storms rattled the windows, remembered something different. There had been love in that cabin once. There had been laughter, even magic. My father teaching me to cast a line, my mother reading ghost stories. Me sketching sunsets on the porch, believing in a future wide open with possibility. What had happened to that version of us? Did my parents truly stop valuing me? Or was there something hidden I could not yet see? Grief twisted every thought into confusion. My father's empty chair at the dining table haunted me. My mother's perfume lingered on scarves folded neatly in her closet. Their absence was unbearable. But so was the sense that, in their final act, they had measured my worth and found me lacking. And then there was Zachary, my brother. He looked at me with that practiced mask of sympathy, offering financial help like charity, as though I were some fragile stray he needed to feed. He said, "The cabin has sentimental value. I'm sure we can work something out if you need money." I wanted to scream. I didn't want his handouts. I wanted equality. I wanted recognition. I wanted the same respect they had showered on him since childhood. But I didn't scream. I sat there, silent, watching him bask in the glow of victory, the empire now his. Little did he know that the empire he thought he had inherited was nothing compared to what was waiting for me in Alaska. That's why I packed my bags. That's why I left the city and boarded a plane toward the wilderness. I had nothing left to lose. No fiancé, no parents, no home in Seattle that still felt like mine. All I had was grief, a letter that sounded like dismissal, and a cabin in the middle of nowhere. But sometimes, when the world strips you down to nothing, it is because something greater is about to be revealed. And that revelation was waiting for me beyond the cold forests of Alaska. When I was a child, the divide between my brother and me was already carved into the walls of our home. Zachary, 4 years older, was the golden child, the one who shadowed my father at construction sites, who learned how to read financial reports before he could drive, who listened to conversations about expansion plans, as if they were bedtime stories. He was groomed to inherit an empire, and he thrived under the weight of expectation. I, on the other hand, was the dreamer. While Zachary wore hard hats and memorized blueprints, I sat in my room with a sketchpad, painting with watercolors until the light outside faded. I was not interested in real estate, in profit margins, or in negotiations. What filled me with joy was art, the smell of paint, the feeling of charcoal on paper, the discovery that I could turn a blank canvas into something alive. At first, my parents pretended to support me. My mother said, "Follow your heart, Emily," but her eyes always lingered longer on Zachary. My father told me teaching was noble, but his tone carried a weight that said, "Not everyone is cut out for greatness." They paid for my education and attended my art shows, yes, but there was always a faint shadow of disappointment. I felt it at every milestone. Zachary was the heir. I was the extra. Growing up in that shadow is a lesson in invisibility. At family dinners, my father would ask Zachary about business trends, about investment ideas, about which cities were ripe for development. When the conversation turned to me, it was polite but fleeting. "How is school, Emily?" he would ask, before turning back to Zachary's stories of market projections. I would smile and answer, even though I knew my words floated like smoke, there for a moment, then gone. Yet, there was one place where I felt seen, the cabin in Alaska. Every summer, when we retreated there, the hierarchy softened. My father taught me to fish, patiently untangling my line when I messed up. My mother sat beside me on the porch, painting with me as though my art mattered. For a few weeks each year, away from the empire and its demands, I was not just the other child. I was their daughter. Those memories kept me alive later, when everything else was stripped away. But life in the city told a different story. By the time I was in college, Zachary had already secured his future. My father introduced him at board meetings as his right-hand man. When I announced that I wanted to major in art education, the silence around the dinner table was deafening. My mother forced a smile. My father nodded once. And then they went back to talking about Zachary's internship with a development firm. I convinced myself it did not matter. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But deep inside, I ached for them to see me as more than a disappointment wrapped in a pretty diploma. And then James entered my life. At first he seemed different. He came to my art shows. He told me my work inspired him. He made me believe that teaching children to create was just as meaningful as building skyscrapers. But slowly, cracks appeared. He asked me why I didn't open a gallery, why I settled for just teaching. He compared me to my brother without even realizing it. "Zachary just closed on that Aspen resort," he'd say, his eyes bright. "Your parents must be so proud." I laughed it off. But inside, his words echoed the same judgment I had heard all my life. Looking back, I can see it clearly. James never truly loved me for who I was. He loved the proximity to my family's wealth, the access to the empire he secretly craved. And when that empire was placed in Zachary's hands, James knew exactly where he wanted to be. It is strange, isn't it? The way life sets up its betrayals years in advance. My parents' favoritism, my brother's ambition, James's ambition disguised as affection, all of it was a storm gathering at the horizon. I tried to ignore the signs. I convinced myself that love would protect me, that my parents would one day see me as equal, that my path as a teacher was enough. But storms don't care about your illusions. They arrive when you least expect it, and they destroy everything you thought was secure. That is why the reading of the will crushed me so completely. It wasn't just about property. It was confirmation of a narrative that had been written since childhood. Zachary was worthy. Emily was not. But what I didn't know then was that the same childhood memories that once hurt me, the summers in Alaska, the cabin where I felt seen, would hold the key to everything. Sometimes, the seeds of redemption are planted in the very places where you first felt invisible. I just had to be forced back to the wilderness to uncover them. At first, James seemed like the answer to every prayer I had ever whispered. I met him when I was 25. He worked in marketing, collaborating occasionally with my parents' company, and his charisma filled every room. He laughed at my jokes, brought me coffee after long school days, and told me that my art inspired him. For a girl who had spent her life overshadowed by her brother, that kind of attention felt like sunlight after a long winter. We fell in love quickly, or at least I thought we did. Within 6 months we were inseparable. He came to my art exhibitions and told anyone who would listen, "Emily is brilliant with children. She makes them believe they can create beauty." I wanted to believe him. I clung to his praise because it was rare in my world. My parents always compared me to Zachary. James seemed like the first person who saw me as enough. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, red flags began to appear. He started asking questions that sounded like encouragement but felt like criticism. "Have you ever thought about something bigger?" he'd say. "Maybe opening a gallery, or working with higher-end clients?" At first, I told myself he was pushing me to grow, but over time, those words carried a sharper edge. He wasn't celebrating what I had, he was dissatisfied with it. And then there was the way he looked at Zachary. His eyes lit up whenever my brother spoke about real estate projects. He quoted my brother's successes in casual conversation, as though Zachary's triumphs belonged to him too. "Your brother just closed on that Aspen property," James would say. "Your parents must be thrilled to have him carrying the family legacy." I laughed, pretended not to care. But each remark felt like a dagger. Still, I ignored the unease. After years of being overlooked, I was terrified of losing the one man who made me feel chosen. So when he proposed after 2.5 years together, I said yes without hesitation. The ring was extravagant, not my style at all, but I wore it with pride. I believed it symbolized a future built on love. I believed him when he said, "We'll build something together." Looking back, I see how blind I was. His proposal was not a declaration of love. It was a calculation. He thought he was marrying into an empire. He saw me as a bridge to wealth, not as a partner in life. The months leading up to our engagement should have been filled with joy. Instead, they were filled with subtle cracks. He grew restless at my school events. He spent more time in conversations with my brother than with me. And when tragedy struck, when my parents' plane went down, his mask began to slip. The day after the funeral, when the lawyer called us to his office, James squeezed my hand as though preparing me for a blow he already knew was coming. His sympathy was rehearsed, not real. I realize now that he had already shifted his loyalty. He was waiting to see which side of the inheritance would hold value. And when the will was read, his silence screamed louder than any words. He did not fight for me. He did not comfort me. He sat stiff, calculating, while my world crumbled. It wasn't long before his contempt became impossible to ignore. He told me I was wasting my potential, that teaching art to children was nothing compared to running a multi-million-dollar company. He said, "Be realistic, Emily. You'll never be like your brother." Those words shattered me. For years I had lived with the quiet disappointment of my parents. Now the man I loved spoke the same judgment out loud. And in that moment I realized James had never truly been mine. His heart had always belonged to ambition. His loyalty had always been for sale. The final blow came days later when I discovered messages between him and Zachary. They weren't just friendly conversations. They were negotiations, a job offer, a partnership, proof that my fiancé was preparing to leave me for my brother's empire. That night, we argued until my voice broke. He admitted he wanted more than a small apartment and a teacher's salary. He admitted he thought Zachary's world offered opportunities I could never give him. And then he said the words I will never forget. "You're not a good investment anymore." I pulled off the ring, placed it on the table, and whispered, "We're done." He didn't beg me to stay. He didn't even look regretful. He just nodded, as though we were finalizing a business deal, and left me sitting alone with the echo of everything I had lost. 3 years of love, gone in a single conversation. But I would later learn that this was not an ending, it was a beginning. His betrayal pushed me toward the cabin. And the cabin would reveal a truth that would change my life forever. Sometimes life strips away people not to punish you, but to prepare you. James's departure cleared the path for me to discover who I really was, and what my parents had truly left behind. The day of the will reading is etched into my memory like a scar. The air in the lawyer's office felt heavy, suffocating, filled with the scent of leather chairs and old books. My brother sat across from the desk like a man already certain of victory, his posture confident, his expression calm. James was beside me, his hand on mine, but the pressure of his grip didn't feel like support. It felt like restraint, like he knew what was coming and wanted me quiet. Mr. Peterson, our parents' lawyer, shuffled papers with a solemn face. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "Your parents were not only my clients but dear friends. This is difficult for me." Then he began reading. To Zachary Miller, the primary residence in Miami, valued at approximately $2.5 million. The investment portfolio, valued at $4.2 million. And controlling interest in Miller Luxury Properties, with all associated assets and developments. The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened. My ears rang. The Miami mansion wasn't just real estate. It was our family home. Every holiday, every celebration, Every piece of my childhood was tied to those walls. And now, it belonged solely to my brother. But Mr. Peterson wasn't finished. To Emily Miller, the cabin property in Bristol Bay, Alaska, along with its contents and surrounding 5 acres of land. That was it. A dilapidated cabin I hadn't seen in years. A place my parents once mentioned selling because it was too much trouble to maintain. The room tilted. My voice cracked. "That's it? Just the cabin?" Peterson avoided my eyes, sliding an envelope across the desk. "Your parents also left a letter. They wanted you to understand their decision." My hands shook as I opened it. My mother's elegant handwriting spelled out the final insult. "Dearest Emily, if you are reading this, we are gone. Zachary devoted his life to building the family business, and he needs resources to continue the legacy. You, our darling girl, have always forged your own path. The Alaska cabin holds special memories, and we know you will appreciate its simplicity and beauty. We love you both equally, though in different ways. Trust that this was made with your best interests at heart." I couldn't breathe. They gave him millions, and they gave me simplicity. They gave him power, and they gave me a decaying shack. The message was clear. Zachary's ambitions mattered. My passion for art and teaching children did not. I looked at my brother. His face was carefully arranged into sympathy, but his eyes betrayed triumph. He leaned toward me and said smoothly, "I know this must be a surprise. The cabin has sentimental value, and if you ever need financial help, we can work something out." That patronizing tone, that smug assurance, it was worse than the letter itself. I didn't want his charity. I wanted equality. I wanted to know that my parents valued me as much as they valued him. James said nothing. Not a single word of outrage. His silence was a knife in my back. Later, when I whispered in the car, "It isn't fair," he only shrugged. "Life isn't fair. It is what it island." That was the moment I realized he wasn't on my side anymore. The letter burned in my hands. I could almost hear my parents saying, "We love you in different ways." But love shouldn't feel like exclusion. Love shouldn't feel like rejection wrapped in elegant words. That night, I lay awake replaying everything. The funeral, the will, my brother's smug face, James's silence, my parents' letter, which felt more like dismissal than love. And for the first time, I felt completely alone. But here is what I want to ask you. If your parents left your sibling millions while giving you nothing but a broken cabin, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you walk away? Or would you, like me, wonder if there was something more hidden in the shadows? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear how you would react. For days I carried that letter in my pocket, pulling it out when the grief felt too heavy. At times I hated my parents for their choice. At other times I searched their words for meaning, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they saw something I didn't. But I couldn't escape the truth. They had given Zachary everything, and they had given me a cabin that was falling apart. It was the cruelest kind of gift, a gift that felt like rejection. And yet, that rejection was the doorway to everything that came next. Because inside that broken cabin was a secret my parents had hidden from everyone. A secret that would transform my grief into revelation. A secret worth over $100 million. But before I could discover it, I had to endure one more betrayal. The days after the will reading felt like walking through a fog. I went through the motions of teaching, but my heart wasn't in it. My students' laughter, once the brightest part of my day, now felt distant. At night, I stared at the ceiling of my small Seattle apartment, replaying every word of my parents' letter. The Alaska cabin holds special memories. We know you will appreciate its simplicity. Simplicity. That word mocked me. It sounded like a consolation prize handed to someone who never quite measured up. James grew colder with each passing day. He canceled dinners, came home late, and avoided my eyes. The final blow came when I saw a message on his phone from Zachary, talking about a job position. It didn't take long for me to realize the truth. The man who once promised to build a future with me was already positioning himself to join my brother's empire. That night, I cooked his favorite meal, hoping to salvage something, anything. Instead, We ended the evening with accusations and tears. He told me I was wasting my life, that teaching children was beneath me, that I wasn't a good investment anymore. Those words were poison. I pulled off my engagement ring, placed it on the table, and told him it was over. He didn't fight for me. He didn't even hesitate. He just pocketed the ring and walked out. 2 days later, I saw the photo that confirmed everything. James stood on the balcony of the Miami mansion, glass raised, celebrating his new position as marketing director at Miller Luxury Properties. My brother's empire now included the man I once loved. It was then I realized I couldn't stay in Seattle. Every street corner carried ghosts. Every colleague's sympathetic glance reminded me that I was abandoned, rejected, left behind. A friend at school, Taylor, pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Maybe you should go to the cabin, get away from here, clear your head." I laughed bitterly. That cabin is falling apart. Another wonderful gift from my loving parents. But her words stayed with me. The breaking point came a week later when I opened an industry newsletter. On the front page was a photo of Zachary and James, side by side at a construction site in Key West, announcing their new partnership. My stomach twisted. The two people who had benefited from my parents' favoritism were building a future together, while I was left with scraps. Something snapped inside me. I walked into the principal's office and requested emergency leave. She was kind, understanding, and approved it immediately. That same night, I packed my bags, warm clothes, basic tools, sketchbooks, and the letter I couldn't stop reading. I booked a flight to Anchorage, then arranged for a bush plane to take me to Bristol Bay. The journey felt endless. From the bustling streets of Seattle to the quiet expanse of Anchorage, then further still to King Salmon, where the wilderness pressed in on all sides. The final leg was a rattling bush plane flown by a man named Pete. He spoke in short sentences about the weather, about how spring was late this year. As we descended, he pointed to a clearing. "That's your place, Miller Cabin, right?" From above, it looked even smaller than I remembered. A dark speck against the endless green. My heart sank. Pete drove me the last stretch in his old truck. The dirt road twisted through trees until, finally, the cabin came into view. My chest tightened. The roof sagged, the porch was half collapsed, and several windows were boarded shut. This wasn't a home, it was a ruin. I stood there, clutching my bag, fighting back tears. Was this what my parents thought I deserved? Was this the symbol of their love for me? Before I could sink deeper into despair, a voice called out. An elderly man with kind eyes and weathered skin approached, carrying a basket. "You must be John and Margaret's girl," he said. "I'm Harold Jennings. I live about a mile down the road. Heard from Pete that you arrived." He handed me the basket, bread, eggs, coffee, small essentials. I blinked back tears. "Thank you, that's very kind." Harold stepped inside, frowning at the damage. "Your folks haven't been here in years. I tried to keep an eye on the place, chase off teenagers, but there's only so much I can do." I swallowed hard. "It's worse than I expected." He nodded thoughtfully. "Surprised they gave you this one instead of the other property." My head snapped up. "Other property?" Harold looked puzzled. "Sure, the land your dad bought about 10 years back, just over the ridge. He was up here a lot, overseeing some construction. I figured that's what he'd leave you, not this old shack." My mind reeled. Another property? Construction? Why hadn't the lawyer mentioned this? Before I could ask more, Harold patted my shoulder. "Maybe I'm mistaken. Memory's not what it used to be." He gave a small smile. "Anyway, let me know if you need help. I'll check in tomorrow." After he left, I sat on the dusty bed, clutching the basket of food. Confusion swirled in my mind. Another property? Why hadn't I known? The cabin was falling apart, but now, for the first time, it felt like more than a burden. It felt like a question. And I was desperate for answers. Sometimes, life leads you into the wilderness, not to punish you, but to prepare you. I didn't know it yet, but the broken porch, the leaky roof, and Harold's mysterious words were the first clues in a journey that would change everything. The first night in the cabin was colder than I expected. The damp air seeped into my bones, and the silence pressed against the walls like a living thing. I managed to sweep a corner clear of dust and mouse droppings, unrolled my sleeping bag, and told myself I could survive at least one night. But as darkness fell, clouds gathered, and a storm began to brew. By midnight, the wind howled around the cabin, rattling the boards. Rain hammered the sagging roof, and within minutes, water began dripping through cracks. I scrambled, moving buckets and pans under the worst leaks, trying to protect what little furniture remained. Lightning flashed, illuminating the decay. Water stains spreading across the ceiling, wood groaning under the assault. It was while crawling across the floor that I noticed something odd. One section of the boards looked newer than the rest, less worn, tighter in their fit. At first, I thought the storm had made me see patterns that weren't there. But when I pressed down with my hand, one plank shifted slightly, springing back into place. My heart quickened. I grabbed the screwdriver from my small tool kit and pried it loose. The wood lifted with surprising ease, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age, my father's initials pressed into the front. My breath caught in my throat. Hands trembling, I opened it. The first entry was dated 10 years earlier. My father's handwriting filled the page, neat and deliberate. Found the perfect location today. Remote enough for security, but accessible when needed. The real treasure will be safe here. Hidden in plain sight, while the world chases shadows. My pulse raced. Real treasure? Hidden in plain sight? I flipped through more pages, scanning for answers. Entry after entry spoke of the collection, of security measures, of consultations with unnamed experts. Words like vault, preservation, and climate control leapt out at me, and then a line that made my skin prickle. The vault is complete. AE will understand someday why we built it this way. The true inheritance isn't what the world can see, but what lies beneath, waiting for the right guardian. AE, my initials. I clutched the journal to my chest as thunder shook the cabin. My parents had written this for me. They had planned something far beyond a broken cabin in the woods. The storm raged on, but my fear was replaced by something else. Hope. For the first time since the will reading, I felt a flicker of curiosity, maybe even purpose. My parents hadn't dismissed me. They had hidden something for me. Something only I was meant to find. I turned another page and found a phrase underlined twice. Fire meets water. No context, no explanation, just those 3 words. I whispered them aloud, trying to make sense of it. A clue, perhaps, to the location of whatever they had built. As dawn broke and the storm faded, I sat surrounded by buckets of rainwater, exhausted but restless. The journal lay open on my lap, and the words glared back at me. Fire meets water. Was Harold right? Had my father built something else over the ridge? If so, what did this phrase mean? A fireplace near water? A river-stone hearth? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. I stepped outside onto the porch, the air crisp with the smell of wet earth. The lake shimmered in the distance, calm after the night's violence. For the first time, I didn't see the cabin as a symbol of rejection. I saw it as a gateway. And this is where I must pause to leave you with a question. If you were in my place, alone, betrayed, given nothing but a decaying cabin, and then you found a hidden journal with cryptic clues, would you have the courage to keep searching, or would you walk away? Tell me in the comments below, because your answer might reveal more about you than you think. And stay with me, because the deeper I went, the more shocking the truth became. That night changed everything. The storm hadn't just battered the cabin. It had ripped open the first veil of secrets my parents left behind. The journal was more than words on a page. It was a map, pointing me towards something I couldn't yet imagine. The daughter who was told she deserved only simplicity now held the key to a mystery worth far more than mansions or millions. And the path to that truth began where fire met water. The clue haunted me. Fire meets water. I repeated those words again and again as I paced the cabin the next morning. The journal wasn't just ramblings, it was deliberate, precise. My father had always been a man of hidden layers, a builder who loved puzzles. He had left me this phrase for a reason. I decided to explore beyond the ridge Harold mentioned. The path was rough, a narrow trail that twisted through dense trees. Branches clawed at my jacket as I pushed forward, the journal secured in my backpack. After nearly 20 minutes, the trees thinned, and I saw it, a cabin much newer than mine. Its roof was sharp and strong, lined with solar panels. Smoke-black stone formed a fireplace on one side, and there, only a few steps away, was the edge of a stream that shimmered in the sunlight. Fire and water, standing side by side. My heart thudded. This had to be it. The cabin's door was locked, but my father had mentioned a hidden key in one of his entries. I circled the foundation, searching carefully. Near the east corner, I spotted it, a fake rock half buried in the soil. Inside was a small metal key, cold and heavy in my palm. The lock clicked open, and I stepped inside. Compared to the ruin I had left behind, this place felt alive. Minimalist furniture, clean counters, a small kitchen, a bathroom. Everything was orderly, untouched, as if waiting for me. But nothing about it screamed, vault. I moved slowly, scanning for anything unusual. My father's journal said, dates that matter. It also said the entrance would be hidden where fire meets water. My eyes landed on the riverstone fireplace. The hearth was built with smooth slate tiles, a few darker than the rest. I knelt, running my hand across them. One tile felt different, slightly raised. Holding my breath, I pressed it. A soft click echoed. I pressed another, then another. 4 tiles depressed in sequence, and suddenly, part of the slate shifted. A seam revealed itself, forming a square outline. My pulse raced. Slowly the square panel lifted, revealing a recessed digital keypad. I fumbled for the journal, flipping to the entry that mentioned combinations. Dates that matter. My parents' anniversary? I typed it in. Nothing. My birthday? Number. Zachary's birthday, the company's founding date. Still nothing. Frustration gnawed at me. Then I remembered a passage from the journal. The day we found the first piece, when everything changed. My mind flashed back to my 8th birthday, when they had gifted me a small painting from a local Seattle artist. It was the first piece of art they had ever bought. My father had written about how that moment sparked something in them both. Could that be it? I entered my mother's birthday, followed by the year I turned 8. 9041997. The keypad flashed green. A low hum filled the cabin. Then, with a mechanical groan, part of the floor retracted. Beneath it, a staircase spiraled downward, lit by hidden lights. Cold air rose up, tinged with metal and preservation. I stood frozen at the threshold. This was it, the secret my parents had buried, the vault. My knees trembled as I stepped onto the first stair. Each footfall echoed, carrying me deeper underground. When I reached the bottom, the sight stole my breath. It was not a basement. It was a museum. A state-of-the-art, climate-controlled facility stretched out before me. Paintings hung in perfect light. Sculptures rested in glass cases. Ancient books were secured behind protective panels. Everywhere I turned, history stared back at me. I recognized some of the works instantly. Pieces I had studied in art history classes. Caravaggio, Monet, Tang Dynasty ceramics. Art I thought belonged to museums or private collections. And yet, here it was, beneath an unassuming cabin in the Alaskan wilderness. In the center of the room was a desk. On it, a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's hand. My heart hammered as I tore it open. Inside was a USB drive and a letter. The letter was short. Emily, if you are reading this, then we are gone, and you have found the truth. Insert the drive. Let us speak to you one last time. My hands shook as I slid the drive into the computer on the desk. The screen lit up, and then, there he was. My father, speaking directly to me, recorded years before. His voice filled the vault. Emily, this is your true inheritance. We gave Zachary the visible empire because it was all he ever wanted. But to you, our daughter with the artist's soul, we entrusted what really mattered. I pressed my hands to my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. everything I thought I knew was unraveling. The cabin wasn't rejection, it was misdirection. And what lay beneath it was worth more than any mansion or company could ever hold. I didn't know it then, but I was standing at the doorway to a secret valued at over $100 million. And my parents had chosen me, not my brother, to protect it. The screen flickered for a moment, then steadied. My father's face filled the monitor, older than the man I remembered, his hair grayer, his eyes heavier with time. But his voice carried the same deliberate strength I had heard since childhood. "Emily," he began, "if you're watching this, then your mother and I are gone, and you've discovered your true inheritance. I'm sorry for the secrecy, but it was necessary. We built an empire in the open, yes. Real estate, luxury properties, the things the world could see. But what you stand inside now, that was our real work, our real passion." He gestured behind him to shelves lined with art. 30 years ago, your mother and I bought our first piece, a small painting by a local artist. It lit a fire in us. We realized art was not just beauty, it was legacy. It was history, preserved through canvas and stone. From that day forward, we began collecting. We bought carefully, ethically, with complete documentation. Every piece you see here was acquired legally, and the provenance for each one is in the safe behind the Monet. I turned, following his hand, and saw it. A heavy steel safe built into the wall. "This collection," he continued, "is worth over $100 million conservatively. Some experts might say more, but to us, its value isn't in the price. Its value is in what it represents: human creativity, the spirit of generations, the persistence of beauty. We built the real estate company as a cover, a visible structure to protect this. We gave Zachary the wealth he craves. But to you, Emily, our daughter with the artist's soul, we give the legacy that truly matters. The legacy we trust only you to understand." My throat tightened as tears blurred my vision. For weeks, I had believed my parents dismissed me, that they saw me as less valuable than my brother. But here was my father, telling me I had been chosen for something greater. He leaned closer to the camera. "We always worried about James. His interest in you grew sharper when he learned about our success. This was partly a test. We wanted to see if he truly loved you, or if he loved what you represented. If he failed, he didn't deserve you. Everything here belongs to you through a trust we established long ago. Peterson has the documents, but he was instructed not to reveal anything until you found this vault yourself. We wanted you to hear it from us, not from papers." He paused, his voice softer now. "Emily, we were proud of you every single day. We saw how you poured yourself into teaching. We never viewed it as a lesser path. We saw it as proof that you understood the true meaning of art. That's why you're the right guardian. You know art is not about money, but about spirit. You may choose what to do with this: sell, donate, display, or keep it private. The choice is yours. But know this: when we said we loved you, when we said we were proud, we meant it with our whole hearts." The video ended. The room fell silent, except for my uneven breaths. I stood there, surrounded by priceless masterpieces, and yet the most valuable thing I had received was my parents' words. For so long I thought they saw me as unworthy. But now I realized they had trusted me with their most precious secret. I walked to the safe behind the Monet painting and opened it with the combination written in the journal. Inside were neat files, each piece catalogued with meticulous detail: bills of sale, provenance documents, even restoration reports. There was no fraud here, no smuggling, no scandal. My parents had built something legitimate and enduring. I wandered deeper into the vault, past sculptures, tapestries, rare manuscripts. My fingers grazed the edges of frames I had only ever seen in textbooks, and then I stumbled into a smaller chamber labeled "Family." Inside were artworks I had created as a child: crayon sketches, watercolor sunsets, even a clay figurine I had made at age 12. They were displayed with the same care as the masterpieces outside. I broke down in tears. They hadn't just valued art, they had valued my art. They had believed in me, even when I thought they didn't. In that moment, the bitterness I had carried for weeks began to dissolve. The rejection I thought I had suffered was a disguise, a mask to hide the truth until I was ready. My parents had given me more than wealth. They had given me trust, respect, and love in the deepest form. And now, let me ask you something. If you discovered that the family who seemed to dismiss you had actually trusted you with a secret legacy worth over $100 million, how would you feel? Would you forgive them for the pain of misdirection, or would the hurt still linger? Tell me in the comments, because this is not just my story. It's a question about what we value most: money, trust, or love. As I stood in that vault, surrounded by centuries of history, I realized something profound. My parents hadn't abandoned me. They had chosen me. Not for mansions or companies, but for something far more enduring. And with that realization, my journey was no longer about what I had lost. It was about what I had been given. For days after watching my father's video, I lived in a state of stunned awe. Every time I descended into the vault, it felt like stepping into another world. The air was cool, the lighting perfect, the hum of the climate control system steady like a heartbeat. Paintings worth more than entire neighborhoods surrounded me, yet I still couldn't shake the disbelief that all of it, every brushstroke, every artifact, was mine. But awe quickly gave way to responsibility. My parents had trusted me with this, and that trust came with weight. I couldn't just sit in the vault staring at masterpieces. I had to figure out how to protect them, how to honor their wishes, and how to make sure no one, not Zachary, not James, not greedy investors, ever discovered what lay beneath the cabin. The first step was security. The vault was already impressive. But I wasn't naive. Secrets like this had a way of slipping out. If anyone learned of the collection, my life would never be safe again. So I studied the systems my father had installed, making lists of upgrades. Better locks, more advanced cameras, encrypted communication. I used some of my modest savings to hire a discreet technician in Anchorage, posing as a buyer protecting a private retreat. Every improvement had to be invisible from the outside. To the world, I was just a woman patching up an old family cabin. Still, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed guidance, someone who understood art on a professional level, someone I could trust. That's when Harold, my neighbor, mentioned his daughter. Elise worked at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, in the conservation department. At first I hesitated. Involving anyone felt dangerous. But the way Harold spoke of her, sharp, ethical, passionate, stayed with me. When Elise visited, I took a chance. Over coffee in the decaying cabin, I said, "I need your professional advice, but it requires absolute discretion." She raised an eyebrow but nodded. Her father had been friends with mine for years. I could see the same kindness in her eyes. I led her down into the vault. Watching her reaction was almost as rewarding as the discovery itself. Her jaw dropped, her hand flew to her mouth, and for a long moment she couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered, "This is extraordinary. Some of these works scholars believe they're in Switzerland, in Paris, in private collections that haven't surfaced in decades. And they're here?" I nodded. "They're mine. My parents left them to me." She circled the room reverently, pointing out details, muttering to herself about provenance, conservation, authenticity. When she finally turned back, her expression was serious. "Emily, this is not just valuable, it's world-shaking. If word got out, you'd be buried under attention, lawsuits, offers you couldn't escape. You need a strategy." And that's what she helped me build. Through Elise, I was introduced to Jonathan Mercer, a lawyer specializing in art and cultural property law. He flew to Alaska under the guise of visiting friends, signed confidentiality agreements so thick they could have braced the cabin walls, and verified the trust documents my father mentioned. He confirmed it all. The collection was mine, protected by layers of legal armor my parents had crafted with care. Jonathan was pragmatic, almost clinical. "You can maintain anonymity," he explained, tapping the files spread before us. "Or you can step into the light. Either way, your claim is ironclad. The provenance is impeccable. Your parents were brilliant." His confidence gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. For once, I wasn't reacting to betrayal. I was shaping my own future. We devised a three-part plan. First, strengthen security around the vault and keep its existence secret. Second, establish a discreet foundation through which I could make small, anonymous contributions to the art world. Donations, loans, even scholarships. Third, begin liquidating less significant pieces to generate liquid assets. Carefully, quietly, without raising suspicion. All of it would move at my pace. No rushing, no grand announcements. At night, I sat in the cabin's broken rocking chair, the journal in my lap, thinking about my parents. They had understood me in ways I hadn't realized. They knew I didn't crave the spotlight or the power of a boardroom. They knew I needed art, not just as wealth, but as meaning. And they trusted me to protect it, not flaunt it. The bitterness I once felt toward them was slowly replaced by gratitude. They had given Zachary what he thought he wanted, but they had given me what I needed. And though my path would be harder, it would also be more true. I realized then that my story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving myself to Zachary or punishing James. It was about building something new from what I had been given, something that reflected who I really was. As spring thawed the snow around the cabin, I felt the same shift inside myself. No longer just a discarded daughter, no longer a fiancée, abandoned for ambition. I was the guardian of a legacy, the protector of beauty, the heir not to money but to meaning. And with Elise and Jonathan by my side, I finally had the tools to carry that responsibility forward. In the weeks that followed, I began to craft a double life. To anyone in the nearby town or in Seattle, I was simply the daughter who had been left with a worthless cabin, slowly fixing it up after tragedy. But beneath that worn exterior, I was quietly building a future powered by a collection the world would never suspect. Jonathan, ever cautious, advised me to start small. If you suddenly appeared with millions, questions would come. Keep the transactions discreet, limited, and strategic. With his help, I sold two minor pieces, a 19th-century landscape and a lesser-known bronze sculpture, through private channels. The sales generated enough funds to support me comfortably, but more importantly, they tested the waters. The anonymity held. No one asked questions. My identity as the seller remained hidden. With those funds, I began investing in two fronts, the cabin above and the world beyond. The cabin became my camouflage. I hired local workers under the pretense of restoring the old family property. We rebuilt the porch, patched the roof, replaced the windows, and painted the exterior in warm earth tones. But I was careful to leave the inside rustic and unimpressive. Dust, old furniture, patched ceilings, everything suggested disappointment, not wealth. Anyone who stepped inside would think I was barely surviving, not protecting treasures beneath my feet. At the same time, I poured resources into something that had always been my passion: education. Quietly, anonymously, I donated to the school where I once taught. Art supplies arrived in classrooms that had gone without for years. Field trips to museums were suddenly funded. Guest artists visited to inspire children who had never dreamed of seeing their own work on display. I never attached my name. Instead, the donations came from the Aurora Foundation, a title Jonathan helped me establish. It was vague, harmless, and gave me cover to move money into projects I believed in. The joy in those children's faces, the excitement in their teachers' voices when they called to tell me what had arrived, it gave me a satisfaction no mansion ever could. Elise became my confidant during this time. She visited frequently, staying in the modern cabin while we catalogued pieces, debated which could safely be loaned, and dreamed of the impact we could make. This Caravaggio alone could fund entire arts programs across the state, she whispered one evening, her eyes gleaming. I smiled, but shook my head. Not yet. The world isn't ready to know where it came from. Instead, we focused on what my parents would have wanted: balance. Some pieces we loaned anonymously to museums, through back channels Elise navigated. Seeing them on display, knowing families could marvel at them without knowing my name, it felt right. Other pieces remained safely hidden, waiting for the right moment. During the long evenings, I often returned to the family room of the vault, where my childhood sketches hung beside masterpieces. It grounded me. When doubt crept in, when I wondered if I was strong enough to protect all of this, I looked at those crayon drawings and remembered why my parents had chosen me. Not because I was ruthless, not because I was ambitious, but because I understood the soul of what they were protecting. Outside, the locals saw only a woman piecing her life together. Pete, the bush pilot, waved whenever he passed. Harold checked in weekly, sometimes bringing fresh bread. "Making progress," he'd say, nodding at the cabin. I smiled, letting him think the repairs were the extent of my work. But inside, the progress was deeper. I was no longer the rejected daughter. I was no longer the fiancée abandoned for wealth. I was someone new, a guardian with a mission. And yet, a part of me knew peace wouldn't last. My brother's empire, the one he had inherited with such confidence, was beginning to show cracks. Rumors filtered through newsletters and business reports, stalled projects, impatient investors, cost overruns. Zachary had been handed the kingdom he always wanted, but he was struggling to hold it together. Meanwhile, James's smiling face continued to appear in press releases. He praised my brother's leadership, spoke of their shared vision, and toasted to new beginnings. But behind those polished words, I could see what my father had warned me about: opportunism. James wasn't loyal to Zachary any more than he had been loyal to me. He was loyal only to ambition. I told myself it didn't matter. I had cut those ties. My world was here now, hidden in the Alaskan wilderness, woven into donations that touched lives quietly. But the truth is, ghosts have a way of returning, and soon enough, both Zachary and James would come knocking, desperate, broken, and unprepared for the woman I had become. For now, though, I focused on my work. By day, I appeared to be the forgotten sister with a shabby cabin. By night, I was the protector of a legacy worth over $100 million. And for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not because of what I had, but because of what I could give. It was 3 months into my new life when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen since the will reading. Zachary. For a long moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I answered. His voice, once brimming with certainty, sounded frayed. "Emily, we need to talk. There are issues with the business." I almost laughed. The golden child, the heir, the man who strutted into the lawyer's office with a mansion and millions, was calling me for help. He explained haltingly. Projects stalled, investors nervous, debts piling. Deals our father would never have approved were collapsing under their own weight. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how things went with the will. Maybe it wasn't fair. Maybe we could work together, be partners. You always had an eye for design. Your perspective could help." His sudden humility reeked of desperation. Months ago, I would have leapt at the chance for validation. But now, I had something he couldn't even imagine. I replied evenly, "I'm settled in Alaska. The cabin suits me. I'm not interested in Miami." Before he could protest, another voice cut in. "James, is that Emily?" The sound of his voice was like a knife twisting in old wounds. My ex-fiancé, the man who called me a bad investment, was still at Zachary's side. Or so I thought. Zachary hesitated. "Actually, James and I have had some differences. He's moving back to Seattle. The Miami lifestyle didn't work out." Of course! Their golden partnership had cracked. I didn't bother hiding my satisfaction. "I'm not surprised," I said. The very next day, James himself reached out. A text message. "Heard you spoke with your brother. Things didn't work out in Miami. Would love to catch up when I'm back in Seattle. I miss you." I stared at the screen, disbelief giving way to fury. Miss me? After abandoning me for my brother's empire? After calling me worthless? I deleted the message without a word. But something in me knew this wasn't over. Men like James and Zachary didn't vanish. They circled back when they smelled opportunity. And soon, they'd come face to face with the truth, that I was no longer the woman they dismissed. Weeks later, the confrontation happened. I arranged a meeting in Seattle, in a private dining room far from prying eyes. When they walked in, I almost didn't recognize the men before me. Zachary's confidence had curdled into worry. James's charm looked strained, his smile brittle. "Emily," Zachary began, "you look good." "Alaska agrees with me," I said lightly. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the cabin. Maybe it isn't fair you got stuck with that while I received everything else. I'd like to buy it from you, give you a fresh start." I studied him, hiding my amusement. Why would he suddenly care about a crumbling shack, unless he suspected there was more? "Interesting offer," I said. "Why now?" His eyes flickered, betraying the truth. He wasn't offering generosity. He was desperate. James leaned forward, his voice softer, almost pleading. "We made mistakes, Emily. But maybe this is a chance to put the past behind us. Start fresh." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Start fresh? With the same man who toasted his future from my parents' balcony? I let them squirm, then said, "I've made some discoveries since moving to Alaska. About our parents, about their legacy. Let's just say I'm comfortable now. Very comfortable." They exchanged quick glances, hungry for more. But I didn't elaborate. Some secrets were mine alone. Instead, I pulled a small package from my purse and slid it across the table to Zachary. He opened it, confusion flickering across his face. Inside was our father's vintage watch, the Patek Philippe he once kept in his study. "I thought you should have this," I said calmly. A reminder of him. "How did you get this?" he asked, bewildered. "I have my resources." I turned to James. "As for you, I have nothing but advice. Next time you decide someone isn't worth your time because they don't shine with money, remember this. Worth isn't measured in wealth. It's measured in character." The silence that followed was heavy. For once, I was the one in control. And this is where I'll leave you with a thought. What would you do if the very people who betrayed you came crawling back, begging for a second chance? Would you forgive them? Would you reveal your strength? Or keep your power hidden? Think about it, and stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything again. The twist waiting just ahead was one I never saw coming. As dessert arrived, I excused myself, leaving them with their confusion. Walking away from that table, I felt no bitterness, no desire for revenge, only clarity. For the first time, I saw them for what they truly were, two men chasing shadows, while I carried the light of a legacy far greater than either of them could comprehend. 1 year later, I stood on the porch of the restored cabin, breathing in the crisp Alaskan air. The cabin that had once symbolized rejection now stood strong, its wooden beams solid, its roof firm, its windows gleaming in the evening light. What had once been decay was now renewal. And in that transformation, I saw a mirror of myself. With Elise's guidance, I had turned the old barn into something remarkable. A small art retreat for students from underprivileged backgrounds. The first group had just completed their summer residency. They came timid, unsure, carrying sketchbooks filled with hesitant lines. They left with canvases bold with color, sculptures shaped with confidence, and stories of creation that would stay with them forever. "They're remarkable," Elise said, handing me a mug of coffee as we looked over the lake. Her eyes sparkled with pride. "That girl from Detroit, Sophia. Her installation piece belongs in a museum." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. She reminds me of myself at that age. All she needed was a chance. Through the Aurora Foundation, we expanded our reach. Anonymous donations flowed into schools across the country. Supplies appeared in classrooms that had once gone without. Children who had never seen a gallery now stood in front of masterpieces on field trips funded by the foundation. Their faces lit up with the same wonder I once felt. I remained in the background, invisible to the world. To outsiders, I was just Emily, the woman who had inherited a broken cabin and built something modest from it. And that was enough. I didn't crave recognition. I craved impact. Meanwhile, Zachary's empire collapsed under its own weight. One by one, projects fell apart. Investors pulled out. Debt consumed the company. He sold the Miami mansion, the pride of his inheritance, to cover losses. For months, I ignored his calls. But eventually, curiosity led me to answer. When he visited, he wasn't the same man who once looked at me with smug superiority. His shoulders sagged, his voice wavered. On a walk by the lake, he admitted, I was wrong. About everything. The business, the money, even about you. I studied him, waiting for the usual arrogance. But for once, it never came. He skipped a stone across the water, his eyes distant. Dad told me I was focusing on the wrong values. I didn't listen. He said I should look at how you lived, finding meaning in teaching, in creating. I thought he was just trying to comfort you. But he was right. I was blind. Something inside me softened. For so long, I had seen Zachary as the enemy, the golden child who always had more. But standing there, stripped of his empire, he was just my brother again. A man humbled by failure, searching for a way forward. We began, slowly, to rebuild our bond. Not as rivals or heirs, but as siblings. He started over with a new company, this time focused on sustainable housing, building for people who needed homes, not just those who could afford luxury. For the first time in years, I felt proud of him. James, on the other hand, disappeared from our lives. Last I heard, he was engaged again, to a wealthy woman in Portland, flashing the same ring he once gave me. When I saw the photo online, I felt nothing but relief. He had never truly been part of my story, only a test I had needed to pass. My healing came not just from reconciliation, but from purpose. I taught once a week at a community center in the nearest town, working with children and adults who had little access to the arts. Their joy reminded me why I had chosen this path in the first place. Not for money, not for recognition, but for the spark in a child's eyes when they realized they could create something from nothing. It was during my second winter in Alaska that I met Michael. A wildlife photographer, he came to capture the aurora borealis and stayed at Harold's for a few weeks. We met over coffee and long walks under skies, lit with ribbons of green and violet. Our connection grew slowly, built on shared wonder rather than ambition. He didn't know about the vault. He didn't need to. He valued me for who I was, not for what I owned. One evening, Elise teased me as we worked in the vault. Your parents were clever. They knew exactly what they were doing with the estate. They gave Zachary what he thought he wanted, and they gave you what you truly needed. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle over me. The irony is that we both lost what they gave us. But in losing, we found something better. I looked around at the collection, at the retreat students, at my brother slowly learning humility, at the life I was building. I realized my inheritance wasn't just art or wealth. It was freedom. Freedom to live authentically. Freedom to give without recognition. Freedom to choose my own path. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. By the second year, Alaska no longer felt like exile. It felt like home. The cabin, once a decaying shell that symbolized rejection, now stood proud and strong. Its rustic exterior fooled anyone passing by into thinking I lived a modest life. But behind that weathered wood lay a life fuller than I could have imagined. Every morning I woke to the sound of loons on the lake, the mountains catching the first rays of light. The silence of the wilderness no longer pressed on me like loneliness. It wrapped me in peace. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was a woman who had forged a life of meaning in the very place where everyone thought I had been cast aside. My days were full. I split my time between teaching at the local community center and working with Elise on the Aurora Foundation. More schools received funding. More children traveled to museums they never dreamed of visiting. A few of the retreat students from the previous summer returned. Their confidence transformed. They weren't just kids with talent anymore. They were artists. Watching them grow gave me a sense of pride deeper than any applause from a gallery opening. The vault remained my secret sanctuary. Sometimes I'd descend late at night with a cup of tea, wandering between the masterpieces, pausing in front of my childhood drawings displayed alongside works by Caravaggio and Monet. Those walls reminded me of the truth my parents had always known, that art wasn't about price or prestige, it was about soul. And that was something my brother, for all his ambition, had never understood, until he lost everything. Zachary's fall was brutal but cleansing. The Miami mansion was sold. Investors abandoned him. The company dissolved piece by piece. For months he disappeared from public view. Then one autumn afternoon, he showed up at the cabin. His eyes carried no arrogance this time, only humility. "I wanted to see the place they left you," he admitted, standing awkwardly on the rebuilt porch. "I used to think it was an insult. Now I think it might have been a gift." We walked the shoreline together, the air crisp with the scent of pine. He told me about his new project, small, sustainable housing developments. No investors with impossible demands. No luxury resorts. Just homes people could afford. "For the first time, I feel like I'm building something that matters," he said, his voice quiet but steady. For the first time in years I believed him. Our parents' lesson had finally reached him, even if it came through ruin. Our relationship, once poisoned by resentment, began to heal. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts. A phone call every week. A shared meal when he visited. A willingness to listen instead of compete. He even volunteered to speak to the retreat students one summer, sharing his mistakes with brutal honesty. "Don't chase money for its own sake," he told them. "Find the thing that gives your life meaning, or you'll end up empty like I did." Hearing those words from his lips was something I never thought I'd witness. Meanwhile, James faded into the background of my life, just another chapter I had survived. I heard he was engaged again, flashing the same diamond ring he once placed on my finger. This time I didn't feel anger, only gratitude. He had been the storm that drove me here. Without his betrayal, I might never have uncovered the truth. And then there was Michael. The wildlife photographer who had come to capture the aurora stayed longer each season. Our connection deepened in the quiet moments. Sharing coffee at dawn, hiking through endless forests, watching the northern lights paint the sky. He valued me not for my wealth, not for secrets I carried, but for the person I was. With him, I found something I hadn't dared hope for. Love that wasn't conditional. As I stood one evening on the porch, the lake shimmering under twilight, Elise beside me with her usual mug of coffee, she said softly, "Your parents knew exactly what they were doing. They gave Zachary what he thought he wanted, and they gave you what you truly needed." I smiled, watching the retreat students laugh in the distance, their canvases drying in the summer breeze. "And somehow, we both ended up better for it," I replied. The truth was undeniable. The inheritance I once viewed as an insult had given me freedom. Freedom to create, to teach, to give. Freedom to choose who deserved to be in my life. Freedom to live without needing validation from anyone. The vault remained hidden, its treasures safe, its secret intact. But my true wealth was not buried underground. It was here, above the surface, in the lives touched, the relationships mended, and the peace I had found. I had once thought my parents left me nothing of value. But standing in Alaska, watching the sun sink below the horizon, I realized they had left me everything I needed. There was a time when I believed inheritance meant numbers on a page, deeds to mansions, portfolios of wealth. That was before the letter, before the broken cabin, before the storm that revealed my father's journal. Now, standing on the rebuilt porch overlooking the lake, I understood how wrong I had been. My parents had orchestrated a lesson so profound I almost missed it. They gave Zachary everything he thought he wanted: money, control, prestige. And he nearly drowned under the weight of it. They gave me what looked like nothing. And in that nothing I discovered a legacy richer than gold. I found art that carried centuries of stories. I found a purpose that extended beyond myself. And I found the strength to live on my own terms. The cabin became a symbol of resilience. Its rough wood and new beams spoke of both loss and renewal. Visitors saw a modest home in the wilderness. Only a select few knew that beneath the forest floor lay a vault containing treasures worth over $100 million. Yet even surrounded by that hidden fortune, I never felt richer than when I watched a child at the retreat hold a paintbrush for the first time, or when Zachary admitted his mistakes with sincerity, or when Michael took my hand as the aurora blazed across the winter sky. Because true inheritance is not measured in property deeds. It is measured in the lives we touch, the meaning we create, and the courage we find when the world tells us we are worth less. One evening, Elise and I sat in the family room of the vault, surrounded by masterpieces and my childhood sketches. She turned to me and asked, "Do you ever regret keeping it mostly private? The world could know what you have. You could be celebrated." I thought about it, then shook my head. Celebration fades, but preservation lasts. These pieces aren't meant to make me famous. They're meant to remind humanity of what we're capable of creating. And the students we help, the lives we change, that's my public legacy. Zachary's journey also weighed on me. Watching him rebuild his life with humility reminded me of something our father once said: "Failure is the teacher wealth can never be." For the first time, I believed my brother might understand that truth. We were no longer rivals in our parents' shadow. We were siblings walking separate but parallel paths. He building homes, I nurturing creativity. And James? He had vanished into another life, carrying the same ring he once slipped on my finger. That chapter was over. I didn't need revenge or closure. His absence was its own answer. The final irony was clear. What I once viewed as betrayal had been protection. What I once thought was rejection had been trust. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as heartbreak, forcing us to look deeper, to grow stronger, to find what truly matters. And this is where I want to leave you with a thought. What do you believe is your true inheritance? Is it the money you hope to earn? The property you dream to own? Or is it something deeper, like the impact you leave on others, the love you give, the lessons you carry forward? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your answer might reveal what you value most. And if you found meaning in my story, don't just walk away. Like this video, subscribe, and join our community so you don't miss the next story. As I watched the sun sink into the Alaskan horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and violet, I finally felt at peace. The cabin wasn't a punishment, it was a compass. It pointed me away from the false glitter of wealth and toward the true riches of life, purpose, connection, and freedom. This was my inheritance. Not the vault of art, not the millions hidden beneath the earth, but the understanding that value is not what the world gives you, it is what you choose to create. And if you want to hear another story where betrayal turned into revelation, where loss uncovered an even greater gift, then stay with me, because the next chapter will show you just how powerful an unexpected inheritance can truly be. The seasons in Alaska have a way of teaching patience. Winter lingers longer than you expect, spring comes slowly, and summer bursts with sudden life. Living here has taught me that healing is much the same. It doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds in quiet moments. The laughter of students painting on the porch, the steady hum of the vault's climate system reminding me of my parents' foresight, the gentle squeeze of Michael's hand when words aren't needed. One evening, as twilight spread across the lake, I realized how far I had come. The girl who once felt unwanted, cheated, abandoned by both her family and her fiancé, no longer lived here. In her place was a woman who had turned grief into purpose, betrayal into wisdom, and rejection into a doorway. I often sit with the journal my father left behind. His words, once cryptic, now read like a conversation across time. The true inheritance isn't what the world can see, but what lies beneath. At first I thought he meant the vault. Now I understand he meant something deeper, the resilience he and my mother hoped I would discover for myself. The collection remains hidden, but its spirit is everywhere. In the children who paint under the northern lights. In the home Zachary now builds with humility instead of pride. In the quiet love I've found in the most unexpected place. So, when people ask what my parents left me, I smile. They left me more than millions, more than masterpieces. They left me freedom. They left me trust. They left me the wisdom to see that sometimes, the greatest treasures are disguised as broken cabins. And that is enough.